Some people think that an action camera should not have a flip-up display. Well, I wanted to test whether they are right and whether the flip-up display is really that sensitive. I'll show you what this display will look like after all these tests a little later. Because before these tests, I compared the Ace Pro 2 extensively with the GoPro Hero 13. And Insta360 wants to beat the latest and newest GoPro in every area this year. Has it actually succeeded? Incidentally, there is already a detailed comparison between the Ace Pro 2 and the DJI Action 5 Pro on my channel. But this video is about the GoPro Hero 13 and the Insta360 Ace Pro 2. And there are 15 important categories that we should take a look at. So let's start with the image quality. And this of course depends very much on color, contrast and exposure. Today I'm going to show you various comparison shots and give you my opinion. I bought the GoPro Hero 13 with my own money. The Ace Pro 2 was provided to me by Insta360 for testing purposes, but this video does not contain any additional paid sponsorship, and I will show you many different comparison shots so that you can form your own opinion. In order to achieve the best possible image quality, two modern processors have been installed in the Ace Pro 2. One of them is exclusively responsible for image processing. Not only does GoPro use a relatively old processor in comparison, but the image sensor of the Hero 13 at 1/1.9 inches is also significantly smaller than that of the Ace Pro 2 at 1/1.3 inches. And that doesn't just affect shots in low light conditions. But what I've always liked about GoPro shots are the beautiful colors. And when we compare the first shots here, it's noticeable that the colors don't differ that much. What is noticeable is that GoPro particularly emphasizes the contrast at the edges, as you can see in the clouds for example. The GoPro also emphasizes the yellow tones, which often makes the shot look a little warmer, even if GoPro sometimes overdoes it with the yellow tones. On the other hand, the blue tones on the Ace Pro 2 are more saturated. Apart from that, there is a very important difference between the two cameras. In the standard settings, the Ace Pro 2 shoots in HDR. This means that different exposures are used to create the image. As a result, the Ace Pro 2 protects the highlights much better than the Hero 13 in the standard settings and achieves significantly better results, especially in difficult lighting conditions. You can see this particularly well, for example, when the sun is shining directly into my face. You should definitely avoid these situations with the GoPro. The HDR feature of the Ace Pro 2 can also be deactivated if required. The GoPro Hero 13 also has its own HDR mode, and I've been wondering for some time why this mode is not used as standard. After all, both Insta360 and DJI take HDR shots in the standard settings, and I think the reason is mainly that the HDR mode on the GoPro sometimes leads to very flat and unrealistic results, such as the skin tones in this shot. Both comparison shots in this example were taken in HDR. I also noticed that the Hero 13 sometimes exposes too dark in HDR. Here you can see two more comparison shots, both taken without HDR, and you can see that the Ace Pro 2 can handle direct sunlight better even without HDR. Even in backlit situations, the Ace Pro 2 usually exposes better as it adjusts the exposure to the face. In addition to the standard color profile, both cameras also have a color profile with more saturation, and the Ace Pro 2 also has several additional special color profiles. I would like to highlight the color profile Leica Natural, for example, which produces very high contrast and cinematic results. Furthermore, both cameras also offer a lock profile for those who want to heavily edit the colors of their shots. However, only the GoPro's lock profile has a color depth of 10 bits. This is a clear advantage if you often want to heavily color grade your shots. Nevertheless, the Ace Pro 2 has clear advantages in terms of image quality, if only because it clearly exposes the shot much better in difficult lighting conditions. In contrast to the first generation Ace Pro, the Ace Pro 2 offers a significantly wider field of view than the GoPro Hero 13. And this is important and very useful, as a wide field of view is a great advantage, especially for action shots, as it creates an immersive look. And the wider field of view can be recognized more or less in all settings. The Hero 13 can only keep up when using Hyperview, but this setting leads to extreme distortion at the edges and I wouldn't recommend it. But the Hero 13 offers an additional ultra-wide lens that allows a wider field of view, albeit with restrictions when it comes to the recording settings. With this ultra-wide lens, which must be purchased as an accessory, the Hero 13 creates a field of view that is roughly comparable to Action View on the Ace Pro 2. But as I said, there are then restrictions in the recording settings. And not to forget, the free-frame video mode of the Ace Pro 2, which saves the unprocessed recordings from the sensor. You can then freely select the field of view view in the app in post. The GoPro Hero 13 can't quite keep up in terms of dynamic range either. As I said, there is no comparison in the standard settings, as the Ace Pro 2 automatically activates the HDR mode here. This naturally protects the highlights much better. In this comparison shot, however, you can see that the highlights of the Ace Pro 2 are better protected even when HDR is deactivated. While the GoPro can take shots at up to 5.3K, the first Ace Pro was already the first high-quality action camera that could take shots in 8K, but the frame rate was limited to 24 frames per second. This has now changed. The Ace Pro 2 can shoot in 8K at up to 30 frames per second. This makes the 8K mode much more flexible to use. And especially on a large monitor, you can easily distinguish a detailed 8K shot from a 4K shot. But of course, 8K generates large amounts of data and not every PC can handle it well. HDR is also not available in 8K. It's therefore interesting to note that even a 4K shot from the Ace Pro 2 can easily keep up with a 5K shot from the Hero 13 when it comes to sharpness and detail, even though the field of view of the Ace Pro 2 is significantly wider. In a comparison with 8K, the difference to the Hero 13 is quite noticeable in the magnification. And there's more. The Ace Pro 2 also comes with a very special feature, the clarity zoom. It offers a 2x zoom, which results in only a slight loss of quality. Here you can see a comparison shot with the 1.4x zoom of the GoPro. The 2x zoom of the Ace Pro 2 produces a much better shot, but the biggest difference in image quality between the GoPro Hero 13 and the Ace Pro 2 is definitely in low light. This is certainly where the GoPro shows its greatest weakness in this comparison. I wouldn't say that an action camera is necessarily made for low light shots, but of course you might sometimes want to take a shot in poor lighting conditions or indoors. And the much smaller sensor of the GoPro simply has major disadvantages here. As soon as it starts to get a little darker, the Hero 13 gets into slight difficulties and starts to lose detail in the darker areas of the image. Here, for example, it's also noticeable that the Hero 13 exposes much darker. When it gets very dark, the GoPro Hero 13 can no longer keep up. The difference is simply too great in these shots. So if you want an action camera that can take acceptable shots even in poor lighting conditions, then you shouldn't opt for the GoPro Hero 13. This all sounds very bad for GoPro, but the GoPro Hero 13 also has advantages over the Ace Pro 2. For example, when it comes to slow motion recordings. The Ace Pro 2 can take equally beautiful shots in 4K at 120 frames per second, which then have the advantages over the GoPro that we have already seen. But the Hero 13 is capable of taking slightly higher resolution shots at 240 frames per second. While the Ace Pro 2's shot is just too soft here, the Hero 13's shot is of just acceptable quality. And then the GoPro Hero 13 also features the new burst slow-mo mode. In this mode it can shoot at up to 400 frames per second, albeit only for a very short time. And even if the image quality is anything but good, this is still a cool feature. The first Ace Pro had an image stabilization that in my opinion was good, but could not fully keep up with the stabilization of the GoPro. That has now also changed. The Insta360 Ace Pro 2 stabilizes the shots at least as well as the GoPro Hero 13, even if I wouldn't say that the stabilization of the Ace Pro 2 is better. On the other hand, Insta360 has come up with something very special for the new Ace Pro in terms of audio quality. A wind guard has been installed on the front of the Ace Pro 2. This is designed to significantly reduce the wind noise. And you can hear it clearly. Even in this vlogging shot here, where both cameras were set to the voice setting, you can hear that the Ace Pro 2 not only suppresses wind noise better, but also other background noises such as footsteps. But you can also hear that the Hero 13's shot is slightly louder, and the difference in wind noise is even greater when we compare a bike shot with a lot of wind. GoPro has been using more or less the same body for several years, and this is slightly smaller and lighter than the body of the Ace Pro 2. And since you sometimes want to attach an action camera to a helmet or other special mounts, this is an advantage, because with an action camera, the smaller and lighter, the better. The lens cover on the Ace Pro 2 can now also be removed and easily replaced. And as you may know, the fixed lens cover was perhaps the biggest disadvantage of the first Ace Pro. The Ace Pro 2 is waterproof up to 12 meters, the Hero 13 up to 10 meters. The usual two GoPro fingers are integrated on the underside of the GoPro. There is also a tripod mount in the center. On the other hand, the Ace Pro 2 has a magnetic mount, which enables practical and quick attachment and detachment from a mount. A magnetic mount is finally also available for the Hero 13 this year, but must be purchased as an accessory. GoPro could also have supplied the magnetic mount in the standard packaging. Okay, it's time to take a look at the display. The display of the Insta360 Ace Pro 2 is not only larger than that of the Hero 13, it can also be folded up completely. This is of course a great advantage if you want to film yourself. It's not always easy to judge the framing on the GoPro small front display. It's also important to note that the display of the Ace Pro 2 now has a significantly higher resolution than that of the first Ace Pro. It's now a sharp and bright display. Now, there were some people who were of the opinion with the first Ace Pro that an action camera should not have a flip-up display. It would make the camera too fragile. That's why I subjected the camera, or rather the display, to a series of tests. I deliberately dropped the camera with the display flipped up and hit the display sideways against objects. And the display has taken several drops well. In this drop, the camera hit the road right on the corner of the folded up display. The edge of the display got a considerable dent, but you can clearly see that the folding mechanism won't be the problem in the event of a fall. The display and the camera still work perfectly. And one thing must be clear, if you drop a camera and the display hits a stone, damage will always occur, regardless of whether the display can be folded up or not. The flip-up display is definitely one of the great strengths of the Ace Pro 2 compared to all other action cameras. What about recording time? So battery life and possibly overheating. The battery life is very similar. The Ace Pro 2 shoots in 4K 30 for 1 hour and 42 minutes. The GoPro Hero 13 for 1 hour and 48 minutes, but charges the battery a little slower than the Ace Pro 2. The Ace Pro 2 also has an endurance mode, which can significantly extend the runtime and in which you can shoot in 4K 30 for around 2 hours and 15 minutes. In addition, the Ace Pro 2 has an advantage when it comes to overheating. The Hero 13 switches off in 4K 60 after 1 hour and 4 minutes due to overheating. At least here in the office at 20 degrees Celsius and without airstream. Because one thing must be clear, you won't have problems with overheating with any action camera during activities with a headwind, such as biking. The Ace Pro 2 records in the same settings until the battery is empty. Whether this is really relevant for you now depends on your usage. In summer and for longer static shots, perhaps on the beach or when fishing, the Ace Pro 2 will be the better choice. But the GoPro Hero 13 still has one special feature in this comparison. The biggest innovation of the GoPro Hero 13 is the accessories that are offered for it, especially the additional lenses. There is not only an ultra-wide lens for the Hero 13, but also a macro lens for close-up shots, where the focus can be set manually. There are lenses with ND filters, and an anamorphic lens for particularly cinematic shots is planned for later. And also cool, there is a side door that has a magnetic charging port on the outside, so you can take longer time-lapse shots outdoors and charge the GoPro at the same time, for example, as the port is also weatherproof. However, all of these accessories must be purchased separately and are relatively expensive. The Ace Pro 2 also has a number of unique features that I can only briefly mention here. It has a pause function and can be controlled not only via voice control but also via gesture control. The AI Highlights Assistant automatically captures the best moments of your shot during longer recordings and presents them in an organized way so that you must no longer spend time searching through the long recording for special moments. It has its own underwater mode for better colors and less distortion, and it now also supports timecode for multicam shots. And the GPS data is now also captured via the smartphone, if you have it with you when you take the shot. Although it should be noted that the GoPro Hero 13 now captures the GPS data internally again. On the other hand, the Insta360 Ace Pro 2 comes with the more interesting and useful app, which also offers a variety of special features and effects. As you can see, there is just not enough time here to discuss all the features in detail. All in all, I hope I've been able to objectively substantiate this. There are few reasons to choose the GoPro Hero 13 in this comparison. It is slightly smaller, and yes, it could be that the new macro lens appeals to you, or you may have a special connection to the GoPro brand. If not, I would recommend the Insta360 Ace Pro 2, as both cameras cost the same at $400. You can find a link to both cameras in the video description. Very often when you use the link for the Ace Pro 2, you will also receive a free gift. Not as clear as this comparison is the comparison between the Ace Pro 2 and the DJI Action 5 Pro. If you haven't seen that video yet, I can highly recommend it. A detailed tutorial and more videos on the Ace Pro 2 will follow. So stay tuned, give me a like as feedback if the video was interesting for you. Write me your opinion in the comments, and see you next time.